was extremely exciting. Like the moment when a customer goes from review mode to autopilot, and there's like first few weeks of a bit of nervousness and is it going to do the right thing, and then building that confidence and seeing it become a member of the team. It's very rare when you feel a bit of magic in the room. I think these moments are extremely rare. I've had some of these moments in the past where you feel it and you want to bottle it and capture it. And I was saying, if we just do one thing for the rest of this year, is capture that magic, keep nurturing it, because that's the path to victory.
Welcome to the Galileo Ventures podcast. I'm your host, James Alexander, co-founder and partner at Galileo Ventures. Today, I'm joined by Daniel Vassilev, co-founder of Relevance AI. Daniel, welcome to the pod.
Hey, James. Nice to be here.
Let's kick off with a little bit of background. For those of you who don't know, Galileo's very first investment was in Relevance AI back in, I think, late 2020. And I think we were one of the first VC investors in Relevance, so I'm very happy to be early backers. So it's only fitting that we bring you on the podcast as our first founder interview, and I'm pretty excited to have you today because we've got a lot to cover. Relevance AI was co-founded by Dan and Jackie Koh and Dan Palmer, creating the fastest platform to build and deploy AI agents, which is obviously a hot growing space right now, allowing customers to grow their business, not their headcount, quote unquote. You've been saying a lot about the AI workforce and how you can enable that for businesses and enterprise. So we're going to dive into some of those questions today. Not many people may know that you've been building this infrastructure to manage AI workflows for over 2 years now since we invested, starting with vector databases and obviously as LLMs have been released. And we've now gone into this area of agent workflows, which we'll talk about. And on top of that, you closed your US 10 mil Series A in December last year, making it one of the largest investments around for AI agent startups globally, which is very exciting. But beyond the headlines, I thought we'd get going and start with your background, if that's all right. Tell us a little about yourself, Dan.
Yeah, happy to. I mean, a lot of me now is relevance, but it wasn't always. I started off really being very into kind of tech and engineering. I was quite lucky when I was quite young. I had a lot of exposure to that at home. And so quickly kind of started coding, really for the ambition to create things that solved my problems. So one of the first things that really got me into it was when I was playing RuneScape with my friends and we wanted to create a little bot to kind of save us time. I felt like maybe that's a good way to use my coding skills and build something valuable. So it was really a tool for me to help make my life easier, I guess. And I did that, ended up building something quite valuable that others wanted to use. So I actually ended up selling it. And
Cool.
That kind of really started off my
How old were you when you built this?
I think this was towards the end of primary school.
Okay, great. So we're still in primary school here. Wonderful.
Yeah. But then when things got a little bit more serious so I grew up in the UK, moved to Sydney when I was probably about 14, and then started high school. And at that high school, I actually met who's now my co-founder, Jackie. We're both very into maths, so we were both in kind of the same maths class and met there. But back then, really didn't know what was to happen. It just happened that when we kind of graduated high school, kind of in that period before high school and university, we were at an 18th birthday party, and he got talking about like this idea he had around music. I thought it was really interesting. I said maybe we could build this, and then a few months later, we started creating something. Built a little prototype, gave us to Jackie. I kind of forgot about it, was on holiday, until he messages me and says, hey, we've got 50,000 users. Can we add ads? Can we add some things like that and start monetizing?
What year was this?
This would have been end of 2014, start of 2015, I think.
Okay, cool. And what was this first app that you guys both built?
So back then, the music space was really actually quite new, and it didn't have a lot of great apps. And so a lot of people would listen to YouTube a lot and stuff in the background. Yep. And it was hard to do that. They didn't have a offering really for that. And so we built an app to help people do this. And then it kind of evolved from there. But the very first kind of prototype was as simple as that. You could share a link, put it in there, create your playlist, and it'll just play it for you in the background. And back then as well, phone batteries were not very good. And so optimizing for battery was actually a really big pull for people, why they wanted to do things in the background.
Awesome. And so this is like obviously pre-YouTube Music days, pre-YouTube Premium, all that type of stuff, right? So you could watch music videos, but you couldn't watch it on your lock screen, right? You had to keep it open.
That's right. And to this day, YouTube Premium is probably my favorite subscription. If there was like one subscription I had to keep on my phone, it'd probably be that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
We might circle back on that later. Okay. After that, that wasn't the only app you built. So actually, maybe just summarize, where did that end up? Like, how many installs did you end up with that app before you kind of moved on?
So after we found out that burst of users, we added ads, started monetizing, started getting pretty lucrative. We hit within 9 months, we hit 1 million users. And so at that point, we were doing some fairly decent volumes in terms of like usage. And it was Android only, if I recall. So it wasn't even on 2 platforms. Didn't know how to make iOS apps back then. Just learned how to do an Android one. So we were limited to one.
And that was 2000 and what year was that?
15, I think. Started to early to 2015. Yeah, I think so.
Okay, cool. And that's basically the start of streaming. I think Spotify was becoming more popular, all sorts of stuff. So that was, you guys were right at the forefront there. And then after that, tell us a little bit more, because it's quite interesting as well where you kind of progressed to from there.
Yeah, so we were both studying at the time at university. This was, our side gig. And to be honest, we really didn't know anything about startups at this point. All we knew was we could build stuff, we could go and market it, we could try to get lots of users on it and just, have a good time doing it. It was as simple as that. And kind of in that process, learned a lot that I think, we now, looking back on it, can reflect on. Jackie got really good at just like finding little interesting ways for us to go viral. At the time, he actually wasn't technical. He became technical later. So we learned a lot of lessons from there. And then we kind of decided like maybe there's an opportunity to keep doing more things like this. And so at the time, Pokemon Go had just come out. It was really popular. And then, one evening I'd message Jackie like, hey, like what if we put some Pokemon on a map? I didn't play the game, but I thought, I'm seeing a lot of people play this around, like when I'm walking in Sydney. I thought someone's going to be doing this. And so Jackie was like, I think that's a good idea. And then I kind of, half an hour later, was like, oh, no, I don't know. It could be silly. And then he was like, no, just build it. Let's just create it. So I created the first version, got it out onto the App Store for review at 2 a.m. And then by 4 a.m. had the Android app out and I went to bed. Woke up and we had like a few thousand users, I think, already. And I was like, okay, I think we might be on something here. And then, within 2 months, we had 4 million users, hit number one on the App Store, 100 million impressions on Twitter, 100K followers in a couple of weeks. It blew up like crazy. And so for probably a period of like 4 weeks there, Jackie and I actually were in the Incubate bunker, which is where we met you, James, back in the Incubate days. And we were using that as like our office. We were there for like probably a week or two, just trying to keep servers alive, trying to keep going viral and do all those fun things. So yeah.
I remember you guys grew from like low digits to like multiple millions in that bunker. Not many people will know this, but I think I'll share it here. I remember distinctly one weekend on a Friday afternoon. I don't know if you remember this. I left Incubate, which was obviously the incubator that I used to run, and you guys were going through it, and you guys were sitting there hacking away with Pokeware, the Pokemon Go app. And I was like, cool, well, have fun. Let's see what happens. I came back, I think the Monday morning, you guys were still there, hadn't left. And all you could do was just keep pushing bugs, fixes, keep answering on Twitter because you had millions of users. You just blew up over the weekend. I don't know if you remember this, but it was like fascinating to watch.
Yeah, no, it was unbelievable. Like we didn't know what to do, honestly. We actually got in like, I think one of the days I was like struggling to keep up all the coding. We got this, I messaged on like, I think Sydney for Startups for some help. This one guy came, now runs a super successful bootstrap company, which is like awesome as well. And built with him for like one night. I think he stayed with us overnight to help us push like this fix out. And that was quite an experience. And again, learned a lot about viral marketing. And I think that was when we did it that time, and also going through Incubate. Just then, we started realizing, you know what, this might not just be this weird hobby that we do during university. Maybe these are skills we can actually apply practically. Like there's a world in which people are doing this. And so that was really it. Like the rest of university, we just kept shipping and iterating and rapidly prototyping things. Lots of failures, a bunch of really big successes, and kind of that's where we kind of cut our teeth.
So then let's just jump to Relevance AI story. So what was the inspiration for Relevance AI? Because it wasn't originally called this. When we invested, it was called something else. And so maybe just sort of give us a little bit of that journey in the early days and how that sort of came together and you decided to focus on this.
Yeah, so after we kind of did all his apps and stuff. Like both Jackie and I did some other stuff. Like Jackie led machine learning, a large corporate. He did some consultancy at UI. I helped lead engineering for a scale up, and then also was doing a bunch of other things. We had learned so much from our experience of like, I guess, what could be done with such a small team. We felt like automation was like critical. Like we felt like automation could be much, much better. And because we had been we'd been using machine learning to kind of optimize for our users, we felt like, okay, there's something here that hasn't yet quite been tapped into that could happen. And so at that time, Jackie at the corporate he was working at, leading machine learning, he had actually managed to automate detection, like fraud detection, really well using a technology like vector embeddings.
Yep.
And I remember him showing that to me, and he was like saying like, look, this is one of the most incredible technologies I've ever seen. I think it's so difficult to use. I saw the challenges of building all of that, but I feel like it's going to lead to another piece of automation. And he was basically ready to like just leave his job the next day. He was like so gung ho, and pretty much he did. Like literally, I think 3 weeks later, he had given notice and quit because he felt so passionate about it. And so we started tinkering. Initially, we didn't quite know what it was. We knew, okay, vector embeddings were difficult to use. We knew they were a key part of like the next layer of automation. We started there, and again, our thesis kind of largely remained this notion of we can automate things better, but we didn't necessarily know what the pieces of technology were and if they were quite there yet. And so we started with the vector kind of embedding space, being super scrappy. Again, we were looking like where could we first apply ourselves, and so we felt, we'll build a really good, what we call basically a vector API. It's the vector database plus a bunch of really helpful APIs to enable making that using that really simple. And this was like in 2020. And we bought vectordatabase.com, and we started there. And Jackie, who used to be one of the top players in the region for this game that I forget the name of, had built like a little statistics website kind of based on that, which got a lot of usage, and then managed to use all of the usage on that to convince like the number one market leader product in that space, that gaming analytics product, to buy us in order to get that statistics. And so that was really how we got our first customer for that product.
Oh, cool.
And that's where we started. And then later on, obviously knowing you guys and Rain and a few others, we started realizing, hey, this has got some like actually really serious legs here. Like we're not going to be able to do this like we've done everything else. We might need a little bit of help from outside capital. And so then Relevance really started kicking off there, but obviously evolved a lot over the next year and a half.
So you really got your start in vector embeddings, which is super interesting. And so maybe just tell us a little bit of the state of the market back then, like what was happening, because from memory, there was pretty much no vector startups that had that were going, or maybe there was just one that was getting going. And then where do you think this could be applied?
So at the time, no one was really talking about this. Like there was some, small groups of people around the world which were in those communities.
Yeah.
But again, they were all very much from like either machine learning or kind of like a very infrastructure kind of lens. We always thought about it as like people for us, like developers. Like if you want a simple way to use it, we wanted to build that layer. And at the time, we didn't even know of really basically anyone doing this. Later on, like there was a couple of key players came out, including Pinecone and Weaviate around a similar time.
Yeah.
But they were very focused on the database layer. They were very much like, let's build ground zero for the database and that architecture. And I think they've done a really good job of that. And most of the world, they had no idea. And so it was actually really difficult initially, like speaking to developers and being like, hey, this is technology, do you want to use it? It can solve these problems for you. But it just was that was actually a very difficult conversation because you had to educate everyone on this.
I remember talking to some of our investors at the time when we made the investment, and then telling some of my developer friends, I'm like, so this is a company we're investing in and it works with vector databases. And they're like, what's a vector database? And which is kind of hilarious now because obviously with AI, they've been very popularized, and we can talk about that in a second. So what did you start off selling or trying to sell originally at Relevance?
So it was really the vector API. It was this notion that people could build really good recommendation engines, search engines with vectors, but nobody wanted to manage the layer underneath. And kind of what we realized as we started getting our first batch of customers, we noticed that even our buyers didn't really care about that layer. What they actually cared about was the layer above it, like the automations they could build with it. So going back again to why we got really excited about it in the original place was Jackie had just built this amazing automation pipeline using it. We felt like it could drive lots of automation, and we found people were really focused on achieving those outcomes. And so we noticed there was a little bit of a gap between where we were and where that was, and we felt like, it much more closely aligned with kind of our original thesis, like being on that layer rather than trying to go down to the hardware. And it also spoke, better to us as a team. Like both Jackie, Dan, and myself have much more experience sitting on that part of the stack. And our customers were there. So we wanted to kind of move to where they were. But one of the challenge is, before large language models came about, to be able to achieve some of these things was like really taking a lot of kind of old school traditional machine learning models, piping them together and kind of using vectors and different pieces of technology to try to achieve that. It was really hard. And so for us, again, a big tailwind moment was when GPT-3 kind of really started coming to live, and then in particular when 3.5 started coming. And that to us was like kind of a big pivotal point.
So you started off with Vector API. Obviously, with the workflows, they were still very nascent in 2020, 2021, right? And I still remember some of these conversations with customers. You were telling us how still wrapping their heads around this idea of natural language recommendation, which obviously is becoming quite hot today. Fast forward to today, once language models came out and once you saw some of this coming together and people starting to adopt this technology, tell us about that shift and then that sort of what Relevance AI is today, and we'll sort of unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, it felt like, it was go time. It was like, okay, technology's caught up to where we needed to be. Let's go. That's kind of how it felt that moment. And so today what we do is we help companies build an AI workforce. In the future, when we're building companies, we're not going to be building them the same way we built them, for the last few hundred years. We're going to have this brand new lever to pull when we scale a company. That's called, that's what we call an AI workforce. But realistically, it just means that we can now automate work in a way that previously was impossible. Like previously, we all thought that automation would lead to less work being done, not more. That never was the case. Like we as a society, we work more than we ever have, despite living in a world full of automation. But the reason for that is that the automation has been kind of like very static workflows. We've never had something that could actually be dynamic, make reasoning on the fly the way that humans can. Yep. And so for a large swath of jobs to be done in a company and functions, you can't automate that because there's so many kind of dynamic decision-making points that require some sort of intelligence to be able to achieve that. And so now we live in a world where, with AI employees, they can actually, work well enough to be able to do that. What we create is a product that helps customers have really commercial grade, kind of best in class AI employees that can do work reliably, and ultimately perform a role end to end. From start to finish, be able to do everything by itself without human intervention. And we have this concept where, instead of kind of agents being in the loop of humans, we say that humans need to be in the loop of agents. Like our agents are running and operating, and they escalate or request help from humans when they need it, not the other way around. Yep. And so for us, we call this beyond Copilot. Like we feel like the world is going to move very quickly beyond Copilot, and we're here to help companies who want to do that.
For the listeners who don't know, you released a blog post after you sort of raised your A around sort of this vision of beyond Copilot. Obviously, Microsoft Copilot and the sort of the phrasing of Copilot became popular last year in 2023. I feel like you were one of the first teams really promoting this idea that actually where this is heading is agents, not Copilot. And now fast forward to 2024, everyone's starting to go, hey, wait a second, this agent thing, it might be a little bit interesting. So I feel like you guys have always been slightly ahead of everyone. Tell us how you view Copilots versus agents now. Like, just give us the summary of that blog post for those that have read it. I'll link to the show notes. But tell me how you view that world now.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the amazing things that obviously happened with kind of ChatGPT and large language models is that it enabled a lot of companies to build really great conversational assistants or copilots, which helped users use their product more efficiently. The reason why we, like kind of our controversial opinion is that this is a short-term trend ultimately is because we think that is amazing. It's a great new feature, but ultimately it's still living in the same paradigm of every other piece of software historically, which is it helps boost the efficiency of each person. It helps make each person X times more productive. So now when you're on that product, instead of clicking 10 buttons, you might ask the Copilot to do something for you. You've saved 10 clicks, amazing. But at the end of the day, you still have a linear relationship between growth and like your output with your headcount, like the amount of people you have. Whereas we feel like the real promise of automation is that it ultimately breaks that. It decouples headcount from your output, and it enables you to do things you actually couldn't fundamentally do before. Because it's not just about making your team like 5% more efficient, 2x more efficient. It's now about saying to your team, hey, if you need 50 more outputs of work, 50 more units of output of work, you can actually just click a button and get that. And so really, it's fundamentally transforming the way we're going to think about work and the output of companies. And for us, it's going to be a great equalizer. It's going to mean that the advantage incumbents have today, because they can afford all of this kind of labor or human capital, is going to kind of whittle away. And it's going to give a lot more people an opportunity around the world to access output in a way they couldn't fundamentally before. And so we think this is actually critical for how we grow as society, really.
Yeah, totally agree. In fact, ever since you released that blog post and we sort of talked about this, I keep thinking every time we need to do something internally as a VC fund, I'm always like, can I spin up a relevance agent for this? Do we have to necessarily build an entire team function for this? So it's been really interesting. It's changed my way of thinking. But what I would love to know, and what I'd love to ask you is run us through a customer use case. So tell us about some of your customers using Relevance today. You don't have to name names if you don't want to. That's up to you. But yeah, tell us how your customers are using Relevance today and run us through a couple of use cases.
So the two main use cases we're promoting today are in sales and support. So we're a horizontal platform, but obviously we acknowledge that this is early days. We want to help people get started somewhere with a clear use case. And the two ones we identified as being really promising is sales and support. The number one reason for that was we had to build out our sales function, and we felt like, well, let's use our knowledge to actually create agents rather than just purely hire people. And secondly, we felt like a lot of the customers we spoke to had a really strong pull there, because for our kind of like target demographic of customers, like they tend to be growing, they tend to be wanting to do more, and they really struggle with the kind of hiring process. Like saying to a team, hey, get me 10 of the best BDRs in the world is not simple. Then training them up, and then the best ones want to become, an AE like a year in. So it's a really difficult challenge for a lot of companies. And so one of the main areas we're targeting at the moment is kind of BDR agents. We help companies automate the kind of end-to-end experience of reaching out to prospects, whether they've come from inbound or kind of like an outbound flow. Our agent can research them, update the CRM, qualify whether they're a good fit or not. If they are, escalate to a rep straight away versus the ones that are not. Nurture that campaign. If they have questions and objections, handle those, and ultimately also do the calendar ping pong to book it in. So from a prospect perspective, you've just received a personalized one-on-one experience with, to what you maybe think is a human. But from the company's perspective, they've been able to now give to all of their prospects the best high-touch experience that you could never do. And so it's completely game-changing for companies. And so one of our customers, Tech Unicorn, they've put actually all of their inbound leads now coming in on autopilot. So every lead that comes in delegates a task to Relevance. The agent then spins up. It works in its kind of multi-agent system, in its AI workforce, works together to research, update the CRM, process the lead, talk to it, and book in meetings.
Wow, that's incredible. So you mentioned multi-agent system. I'm not too sure if everyone's familiar with that. Maybe just unpack that a bit more, because I think whenever I've mentioned this sort of use cases before, when I've been discussions, a lot of people talk about, I've seen, OpenAI's GPT marketplace. I've seen this agent that does this one thing. Run me through what a multi-agent system is to you guys.
Yeah, so a multi-agent system is essentially when you have a group of agents working together, collaborating to solve a problem. So when we say an AI workforce, so that's the category. So when we say an AI workforce, the definition for that is a team of diverse agents that can collaborate together to solve complex tasks for a human workforce. And we're really intentional about that definition, all the way from a team, because to get really accurate high performance, you want each agent to be responsible for as little as possible. And so you give it specific jobs to be done to be able to be really high performance, be commercial grade. We also say they need to be collaborative, because if you just had somebody that could research, but they couldn't, also send out an email and answer questions, you really wouldn't be able to achieve the function. And diverse, because ultimately, if you just had 50 BDR agents in a company, if you had 50 BDR reps in a company, that wouldn't be a company. You want marketing people, you want engineers. And we also think an AI workforce exists in the exact same philosophy. That's why we're horizontal. We think that ultimately you want your agents to have different skill sets that they can collaborate with. So your support rep can identify an opportunity for expansion or upsell, and delegate that to your BDR rep. You do that in a human team. The BDR asks the product manager for a roadmap. Why shouldn't the AI workforce do the same? And ultimately, for the human workforce is in there as well, because at the end of the day, we believe that this is intrinsically part of your current organizational structure. And so when people ask me, like, how do you make sure agents don't make a mistake? I typically ask them, like, how do you make sure your employee, your new hire doesn't make a mistake? You've got review processes, and we kind of build that in, we layer that in, we give best-in-class experience for actually escalation pathways and manual actions, because we know that this ultimately exists for the human workforce.
Yeah.
And so that's our definition, and kind of the multi-agent system is like one umbrella term that the industry is going with now for defining that.
Now, run us through a little bit more about this sort of observation and building in this sort of process error checking aspect, because I think, when agents as a term started to get popularized, there was a few little tools that came out that were open source. A lot of devs were hacking away with things like Baby AGI, and that became popular within sort of a, I guess, engineering sphere, but ultimately they weren't very reliable. How do you sort of tackle that reliability issue at Relevance within the current product, and what's those challenges you've had to overcome?
Yeah, it's really hard. Building performant, reliable agents is really, really difficult. Like, those like projects that came out, whether it was AutoGPT, Baby AGI, were amazing because they gave us a taste for what's possible. But ultimately, the challenges people faced was because when you think about, how a team operates or a workforce operates, it's not just one little piece. Like when we think about Relevance, for us, it's almost like a project management interface for your entire workforce. If you think of like Atlassian, right, they've got a suite of products that help you manage your workforce. And that's a really complex problem, like from Jira to Confluence, all the other products they have, like Bitbucket, that's all designed there to help make teams really productive. Well, if we think about teams, like if we think of AI agents, again, as just being teams of employees, they might be, AI-based rather than human-based. They need all that project management around it. And so for us, again, like we make so many intentional decisions about how we design and build this from our thinking. Like we don't think it's a conversational assistant. You don't see anything in our interface for conversations. You see everything about tasks. The way our tools and who can create our tools are designed for low-code subject experts, not for developers. We know that a salesperson knows how to write messaging a lot better than an engineer does. So we give them the ability to create the skills and distill their expertise into the agent through these tools. So we've got a low-code builder for that. We have a whole video if people are interested, the anatomy of a Relevance AI agent. We build all this functionality that gives the agents their capability. And at the end of the day, the large language model for us is we use it as part of our reasoning engine. But that's only just one little piece of actually making these agents work. And so why it's so difficult is because, and probably the biggest objection I get from, kind of a first sales call is like, does this work? Can it work? And so it's just really hard to make it work well. But if you start thinking about it, I think from a specific lens and start treating it in a specific way, it actually becomes a lot simpler. And so now we've got a really good process and a really good, I guess, like framework and an architecture for being able to get really good results. And part of that, again, has been identifying how a workforce should work and giving kind of like, I guess, just first-class tools to be able to enable that. And when we sell to people, we're not selling them like a piece of software. We're not saying this is another sales tool in your stack. This is not another HR tool. This is an AI employee. This is your AI workforce. This is, it's not software spend. It's actually like bringing on a team. And so that's why we tend to work with companies that grow, because if you're trying to grow, I don't know, 10, 20, 50 headcount, we can really help alleviate a lot of that pain.
I mean, it's fascinating kind of hearing you talk about this, because I feel like a lot of people gloss over the complexity of agents. They kind of think it's just this thing you can just build a workflow and then you're done. And I don't think they quite realize how difficult it is and how much IP there is in making them reliable and making them an actually useful piece of software or tool. You mentioned support was the other use case. Do you want to just dive down, give us an example of how a customer is using support right now with Relevance AI?
Yeah, so we've got customers who basically can take all of their kind of support processes. So when you think about a support rep, like again, a lot of people, when I say we do support, we help customers with support, they think like a chatbot, which you ask questions to and answers. That's amazing. There's great products out there, and I think they're really valuable. But what we're trying to do is help companies who tend to have fairly large support teams. They tend to have SLAs around how quickly they respond to things. And they tend to have fairly complex support processes. Like a support rep might exist in Zendesk and Jira and some portal to do refunds and some admin tool. And so all these other tools that kind of help reply with like chat can never quite do the whole end-to-end. And so what we help companies do is create essentially a support AI employee, which they can then have it integrate with their admin dashboard to get like recent usage, their Stripe billing dashboard to do refunds, their knowledge base to answer questions as well. Whatever it is, like actually help them take care of that end-to-end flow, because again, to be a valuable team player, we need to be able to help them with the end-to-end flow. And so we help customers with that. And again, we have guardrails, like if the refund process right initially, no customer saying, hey, just let this AI flow go wild, just keep refunding. Initially, it's in review mode. But once they build confidence with it and know it's doing its right job, like you would a regular person, you can put on autopilot.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like, I feel like the analogies for AI today is less and less so like software previously, but more and more like, how would you treat a person? And how would you like train up a person, as opposed to like, let's just hard code some rules, which is sort of, the era of SaaS from the last sort of 2 decades, so to speak. So it's super interesting. I wanted to dive into a little bit more around your competitors, I guess. So being an investor, obviously thinking of my investor hat on, a lot of the feedback I get and when I talk to other investors is they're really worried that, AI is going to be dominated by, at least initially, by incumbents. Incumbents are just going to add AI or add an agent. As a startup that literally is going against these incumbents, like how do you think about that, and why do you think you're going to win?
So I think in the short term, maybe they will. They've got bigger distribution. They've got that, if they add a feature to their product which has AI on it, it's definitely going to get more usage. But I think fundamentally what we're talking about here is a pretty significant shift in terms of how we work. And that shift actually doesn't necessarily align with the incentives with a lot of incumbents in terms of like what makes their product tick. So if you are selling a kind of a sales, let's say a sales tool, right? Like it doesn't make sense for you to go out and now build a whole AI workforce platform. Like that's not in your DNA, and you're probably not going to win there. But adding AI to help improve the efficiency of using your product makes a lot of sense. And so, for example, we see a lot of platforms out there. If our customer sales reps are using those tools, our AI agents will be using those tools as well. And so we actually don't see those as being much of a competition. But I think typically what we get asked a lot about is like, what's OpenAI doing, or what is potentially some other startups in the space doing? And although we do, I guess, keep an eye on that and are mindful of what they're doing, at the same time, at the end of the day, like I think what's really critical is that we kind of stick to our guns with kind of our thesis and our vision. I think we've shown that the way we're thinking about an AI workforce is quite unique. And I think for good reason. I think we've got controversial opinions, whether that's beyond Copilot or whether that's how an AI workforce exists. And I think fundamentally that's actually what's going to help us win, because it's a bit of a scary, like I think for a lot of people, it's a bit of a scary idea initially. It's this, what does this world look like? What does it mean? How does this mean for software? And I think you have to be built up from the ground up to have the right incentives aligned for you to be able to succeed in this. For us to win, we just have to show it works, and we have to be able to scale it. Like those are the two things I repeat to the team almost all the time. Like I was like, the only thing that matters is prove to each customer that this thing works on autopilot. And if they don't love us, I'll be absolutely surprised, and we'll pack up. Because if we do what we say we do, it's just so transformational that there's no way these people, customers aren't going to want more of it. So we just focus on solving it first, then scaling it second, and let the rest sort itself out. That's our mission as a company, stay focused. And I'm really proud because over the last 2 quarters in particular, a lot of the foundation kind of pieces that we've been building have started coming together and enabled us to produce some really amazing results. And so I think as case studies start coming out, as we start entering the latter half of this year and then early next year, the conversation is going to shift a lot from, should we be using AI workforces? What is this thing? Like, are these things, can they work, to, we really want to be using this. How can we get started with this? And so what I'm thinking about our company is, how do we put ourselves in a position to be the best product possible for customers to pick in that situation? Because we're completely convinced that that's going to happen.
Gotcha. Oh, that's exciting. I look forward to some of these announcements and use case examples as you push them out there in the coming months. I wanted to ask a little bit around how you view AGI and agents. I think in the media, so generally, there's a lot of discussion, debate around AGI and AI doomerism. Like, what do you think about that? Like, how do you view AGI and how do you view agents? Just run us a bit of the Daniel thinking.
Yeah, if I'm honest, I actually try not to think too much about it because I just get so philosophical so quickly.
And you can get philosophical if you like. I don't mind.
and I think to me that the challenge with anything like AGI, right, is that to me it's a spectrum really, and what people define as AGI, I think is just going to be different. I think to someone, who lived like 200 years ago, just seeing the ability to like, I don't know, do some of the basic reasoning that RPA tools can do, that probably to them might be like, oh my God, we've got to. And so I think to me, it's a spectrum. What I'm really passionate about is helping customers, like helping provide value to customers. And to us, that means automating as much work as possible for them and helping them achieve their goals as best as possible. And so when I think about kind of AGI, although I am kind of, I do like to think about what world are we going to live in, like, in terms of like the kind of from a sci-fi perspective, are we just going to have like little robots everywhere walking around and interacting with us? But at the end of the day, I think that's a natural progression that's going to happen. I don't think it's going to be like a linear point in time where we now say it's AGI, because frankly speaking, if what BDR agent does today, like for all intents and purposes, for that function, to me, it's achieved like a significant level of intelligence. Now, whether that's a human that can do everything, not today, but it can get there. And at the end of the day, as long as Relevance as a company is providing value to our customers by being able to solve the kind of tasks and jobs to be done for them, I think we've achieved our purpose. And in the meantime, I'm excited to see kind of the world we live in. From our perspective, for what it's worth, like if you're curious about like the impact we think we make, is we think ultimately we bring a ton of value to like people. I think ultimately the whole team, we had a nice little impact session. What are the things that we would like to be able to see come out of an AI workforce, and what are the things we don't want to see come out of an AI workforce? And it was really enlightening because you could see like how passionate everyone on our team is to actually be a force for good. And there's just so many ways that, I have one of my favorite charts is looking at the percentage of humans living in extreme poverty over the last 100 years, right? Like 100 years ago, you had 80% of the population around the world living in extreme poverty. Today, you have a tenth of that. And what happened was, like, if you look at the chart, we had population increase initially. Why were less people living in extreme poverty when it was growing? Because we had more automation, we had more access to food. All these automation pieces meant more people could, survive. And then in the 80s, right, the advent of chips and the level of automation that provided then started making a dent in the actual total number of people living in extreme poverty as well. It brought it down to 200 million from about 800. Yeah. And I was saying, as a team, we think about this and we're like, how can we accelerate this trend? How can an AI workforce actually help give people more access to healthcare and food and shelter? AI is going to do a big job of that, but as an AI workforce company, we can also make a dent in that as well. How can we accelerate that trend? And ultimately, not just talk about people living in extreme poverty, but people thriving. Like, for me, that's what automation is going to bring. Economists, Dan Palmer on the team, he loves talking about how Keynes has this famous quote, by 2030, people are going to be like working a fraction of what they are now. People thought that was a joke. In the last 50 years, none of this was happening. That prediction's completely off. But we're starting to live in a world that might be true. People might have a lot more opportunity and access to essential services than we've ever had in humanity. And to me, that's an extremely exciting proposition. I hope it happens as soon as possible. And whether we call that AGI, whether we call that whatever it is, I guess will be an interesting kind of thing to reflect back on. And, when we're all older, looking back on life, I guess we'll talk about that.
I think if you're on the extreme end of AGI, you're kind of the singularity buff that's going to come in whenever that is, 2030 or 2035. I'm not sure I subscribe to sort of that singularity aspect. I think that's a bit extreme, but I agree. I think I agree with a lot of what you're saying around having access to a lot more services and allowing people to enable to do a lot more things with AI is probably the only way we have. I'm a big subscriber that for us to have things like universal healthcare, there only is one option, and that is AI. I don't think we can absolutely give everyone a therapist. It's never going to happen, right? We can't give everyone a math tutor. It's never going to happen. But we can give everyone an agent of some kind, or everyone an AI program of whatever that means, right, in the future. So I think that's really exciting. Talking a little bit more about the future then, so kind of pushing away AGI for a second, where do you see agents heading, and what's the team building and working towards?
So for us, the number one goal is we want to be a market leader in the space. The way we achieve that from our perspective is by showing that this is real to as many companies as possible. For the next couple of quarters, we are really focused on those two use cases, but we think that towards the end of the year, we'll be in a position where we want to enable more companies to be able to create agents from the ground up themselves, rather than kind of starting from a template and editing. And that's a big piece that we're thinking about for the future. And again, just setting ourselves up, putting ourselves in the right position so that when the flood of interest happens from companies globally, across industries, across verticals and sizes, we're ready and prepared to help them go on this journey. Right now, we're trying to give as much love as possible to every one of our customers that's joining us today. It's extremely exciting. Like the moment when a customer goes from review mode to autopilot, and there's like first few weeks of like, a bit of nervousness and is it going to do the right thing? And then kind of building that confidence and seeing it become a member of the team is a really exciting point. And so as a company, what we're really focused on is being able to do that. We're building out a GTM at the moment. So I'm moving to San Francisco a little bit in a few months, getting our first AE hires over there. We're going to focus more kind of on the North American market as we're getting a lot of pull there. Locally in Sydney, we just opened up a brand new office to house all these amazing people that we have. And I say this a lot when on the first days, it's very rare when you feel a bit of magic in the room. I think these moments are extremely rare. I've kind of had some of these moments in the past where, you feel it and you want to bottle it and capture it. And I was saying, if we just do one thing over the next, for the rest of this year is capture that magic, keep nurturing it, because that's the path to victory. Like we can overcomplicate things every other day, but as long as we just keep capturing that and nurturing it, we'll succeed. And so we're looking for great engineers to join us. One of my favorite discussions the other day from Josh, our engineering lead, was like, look, if we keep kind of growing at this rate, we're definitely going to need more people to be able to grow the machinery out more and more. And so that's an exciting problem to have, starting to think about things slightly differently. So definitely hiring a lot of engineers at the moment, including AI engineers. Jackie's got a whole kind of AI labs team doing a lot of R&D.
Yeah. What type of engineers are you looking for right now? Maybe just give us a quick brief.
Yeah.
And hopefully someone on the podcast listening can reach out.
Yes, on the product team, JavaScript kind of is what we use. On the back end, Node.js. On the front end, Next, so TypeScript in particular. On the AI side, a bit more Python, but people also who like working and building and creating agents on our platform. People who know how to do like evals and research is also really helpful as we kind of get deeper into that. But number one really for us is, do you have a passion for this? You can't fake and create passion. If people have a passion, we love working with people like that. And then if they're experts at their craft and want to work in kind of like a high performance environment, then they're going to love it here. And so anyone who's currently looking or thinking about being, I guess, part of what we believe is a really significant shift in how we work, we'd love to have them stop by our office, check it out. Check out the team, check out the product. Love to chat to them, and we're excited to create hopefully a bit of an epicenter of AI in Australia.
Fantastic, thanks, Dan. I'll put like your links in the show notes. People can check it out and apply if they're interested. Last question for me, I guess, is sort of around what excites you. So you kind of touched on this before. You want to be a horizontal company. You don't want to be a vertical company. Run us through a little bit more about that. Like, why do you think you'd be a horizontal company, and what excites you about being a horizontal company?
I think to win in this space, you have to be horizontal. We talk a lot about the compounding effect of AI agents when they work together. And I go back to the analogy. If you had 10 engineers on a room building a great product, that's amazing. But what happens when you add a marketing person to that team? Like, it could potentially 10x the output of that company, not because that marketing person is worth 10 engineers, but because they've introduced a new skill. And again, like if we keep thinking about an AI workforce in the paradigm of like workforces that have existed for a long time now, you realize that it's much more useful to have a workforce that can collaborate and work together and solve problems together than just having a single point solution for each piece. And so for us, it's a necessity more than a desire. I think the only way you win is if you are horizontal. I think the only way you stay horizontal is if you actually believe that. I think it's really easy to just dive into vertical, and we see a lot of people do that. But I think ultimately that's what helps us win, and that's what helps us build really kind of best performing agents for the task we have. And so what I'm really excited about, I guess, for me, is just seeing this play out. I'm really excited to see more and more companies succeed with an AI workforce. I know one day we're going to have founders who are going to build their companies on top of us, and I'm really excited for that moment to happen in the future, because I think it'll give them a huge advantage. I think companies that have historically kind of been difficult to build because of capital requirements, because it's really expensive to compete against a company that has like 50,000 employees, are going to have a different opportunity to do that. And so that really excites me, the things that we can enable.
Yeah. I often give a talk whenever I'm talking to sort of students and stuff. I have a graph that shows like the amount of engineers and time to launch Microsoft Word, to then like a streaming service, to then like Instagram, to now today is like ordered of magnitudes less engineers to get to launch. And I think seeing what you guys are doing with agents, but also with the advent of AI, it's like another step change down. Being able to build all these things today is like incredible. And it's really fascinating to see. I've seen some of the workflows on Relevance, so I'm pretty excited for everyone else to sort of hear about them as you publicly release them. Is there anything else you would like to add?
The only thing really, again, is if you're looking for new opportunities, come check us out. This year, so far, we've had to accelerate plans twice. So we're excited to have a really amazing year. We want people to help us do that. I said that recently that it's an amazing moment to join right now because it's early enough where you get to have like an outsized impact and opportunity as we grow. But it's late enough now where we've kind of gone through a lot of the research and figuring things out and feeling like in a place where the mission and the vision is super clear. We've got customers who love us, and we know right now if we do 1, 2, 3, kind of step 1, 2, 3, like we'll have a lot of success out of those. So I think it's a great time to join. If anyone's interested, let's have a chat. And again, if you're alternatively in a company, you work in sales at a company, you work in support at a company, have a chat to us. We might have some interesting stuff for you to be able to show your leadership team to really fundamentally help change maybe how you think about certain problems and challenges you face today.
Great. Thanks very much, Dan, for coming on the podcast. I'll put all the details in the show notes so people can reach out, and we'll have to host a Galileo Ventures Pod special follow-up, maybe in your new office once you guys are up and going, live event.
Absolutely. Sounds good. Thanks, James.
All right.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you.